Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you to the Cincinnati Railroad Club for having me a second year in a row. Really appreciate it. And I apologize for not being able to present live from Cincinnati Union Terminal this time, but hope to visit and see everybody soon. So last year I gave a pretty broad overview of my night photography of trains and the many years leading up. But for this presentation, what I'd like to do is recap some of my photography since last March, and particularly highlight our successful Nebraska Zephyr night photo shoot at the Illinois Railway Museum last October. First of all, I would like to dedicate this presentation to the late Bert Maul. Bert was one of the founding members of the Steam Locomotive Heritage Association and the group that operates the Sioux Line 1003. Aside from being instrumental in the restoration and maintenance of the 1003, he was one of the nicest guys you would ever know. He was a massive CB&Q fan and grew up chasing Q steam locomotives and had since published a book with his photography for everyone to enjoy. I thank Bert for his mentorship and compliments of my own photography. So last year I explained that I have been infatuated with nighttime photography of trains for a long time. I enjoy spontaneous rail fanning at night with moving trains, utilizing different methods to freeze a moving train out in the wild, so to speak. But I also enjoy doing staged lineups and reenactments at museums or anywhere else. I have been lucky enough to lead several night photo shoots at the Illinois Railway Museum in the last few years, namely several steam department night photo shoots, plus one very special electric car photo shoot. My goal for 2025 was to do something different, which you'll see later in the program. Last April, the Railroading Heritage of Midwest America in Silvis held their very first open house event at the Old Rock Island locomotive facility since the property was acquired by the group a few years ago. After the gentleman who was initially supposed to run the night photo shoot experienced a family emergency, I was called in to lead the event in his place. The main stars of the event were the Union Pacific DDA 40X number 6936 and Santa Fe B40-8W number 537. The 6936 was donated to Silvis by UP and was given some repairs to bring it back to operating status, and the 537 was donated by BNSF and was a complete cosmetic restoration by the Silvis crew to bring it back to its iconic original Superfleet paint scheme. As an added bonus for the event, Grambling Locomotive Works trucked in the Jetto Coal number 85, a Vulcan Iron Works 040T tank engine built in 1928. Pictured in front of the neat little engine is Barney Grambling, the owner of the locomotive. Last time I went into detail about my use of a mirrorless camera, a prime lens, and AI-driven denoise software to photograph moving trains in super low light situations. I did that just here with the WAMX number 4170, leading Wisconsin Southern's westbound train out of Chicago through Rondout last June. The 4170 is a favorite for Chicago area rail fans, as it is the only WSOR SD40-2 with positive train control, therefore making it the only SD40 that can lead to Chicago on Wisconsin Southern trains. Though I would consider my usual camera setup to be somewhat minimalist, my goal is always to exploit the abilities of all of that equipment and use them to their fullest capabilities. Last summer, prior to the annual Illinois Railway Museum Diesel Days event, the diesel department spruced up Burlington Northern E8 number 9976 to backdate the locomotive's paint to a scheme worn on BNE units prior to their rebuild at Morrison Knudsen. This locomotive does operate, however, at the time, the locomotive did not have its own batteries, So to accomplish this image, I used my own lights to illuminate the engine's ground, cab, number board, and marker lights. Here we have Iowa Interstate GP38-2, number 700, in Blue Island, waiting for the conductor to throw a switch before heading into a recycling facility. For this, a good buddy of mine was the engineer on that train, and he tipped me off about the move ahead of time. After a 5-year hiatus, Metra's Operation North Pole event returned to the rails in 2025. Operation North Pole was founded in 2009 and for many years has helped spread joy to children and families affected by illness with a day-long holiday-themed train ride. The event took several years off due to COVID and other factors, but it returned in 2025 with a fully decorated train set seen here crossing the Fox River on the very first night the train ran in commuter service after its decoration was complete. This gentleman's name is Roger Scoville, and he is seen here in front of the Pier Marquette number 1225 while it is stopped at the North Pole in Ashley, Michigan. Roger was one of the original Michigan State University students who rebuilt the 1225 and has a lifelong relationship with the locomotive. He was kind enough to take a moment to pose for this picture before the train left to head back to Owasso that night. A few years ago, the Great Lakes Central Railroad acquired 3 EMD SD35s from the Montana Rail Link. 2 of the engines were repainted into unique paint schemes different from one another, inspired by themes of the New York Central Railroad, and the other, seen in the middle of this consist, was given a simple patch job. Last year, it was announced that the Great Lakes Central, which was already partially owned by Watco, would be fully acquired by the large holding company, endangering the railroad's locomotives with their unique paint schemes. A long weekend was spent last December documenting the railroad's operations just in time before Watco brought in new engines. Since this image was taken, at least 2 of the engines have been remarked with WAMX marks for Watco, and several Great Lakes Central locomotives have been either retired or sent off property. Once I started going to the Illinois Railway Museum as a young visitor, I became enamored and infatuated with the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, mainly through the experience of riding in the Nebraska Zephyr's observation car, Juno. Even beyond the smooth swivel chairs and pleasant ride of an articulated train set, there's not much one could dislike about a train like the Zephyr. The sleek stainless steel exterior of the 5-car train, led by the only remaining EMC E5 number 9911A, is the best example of true peak golden age American rail travel and preservation, and might be the most sleek passenger train to ever have existed. The Burlington's bright Chinese red paint scheme always struck me as the most attractive outfit a diesel locomotive could wear, with the earlier black and gray paint scheme a close second. This image is from an IRM Diesel Department night shoot in 2022. Ever since I began planning and coordinating night shoots at the Illinois Railway Museum, I always had hopes of an evening with my favorite railroad and my favorite train as the subject. In October of last year, Ralph Durham, James Keats Jr., and I, with help from Dad Launariti and Andrew Ostler, plus the entire Illinois Railway Museum Diesel Department, planned and executed a high-quality night photography event with the Nebraska Zephyr as the centerpiece, surrounded by other pieces of CB&Q equipment. The event took several tireless weeks of planning, but the final result was well worth all of the effort. The sold-out crowd enjoyed several hours of photography inside and outside the 1935-built all-stainless steel train with era-appropriate actors and props. One of the biggest things I wanted to accomplish for this event was having as many conductors and trainmen plus acting passengers as possible. We were lucky enough to assemble 4 trainmen and 3 conductors with complete Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy style uniforms, all with matching jewelry. This was the first setup we did that evening. We spent time trading buttons and badges, plus other pieces for the uniforms ahead of the event to make sure each crew member looked as complete as possible. Most of the pieces of the uniforms worn that evening were original to the CB&Q, and some were even worn by relatives of the crew members in this picture. Here's all of our conductors and trainmen, plus our 12 wonderful passengers for that night. All of these folks were either also IRM volunteers or were friends or acquaintances of Ralph or myself or other volunteers. As we've done these events in recent years, we've been lucky enough to have built relationships with local folks who are willing to dress up and play the part for these photo shoots. And this is Ava, our pinup girl. Ava was a friend of one of the other IRM volunteers and has amassed countless outfits for doing all kinds of different pinup events. You'll see her change outfits a few times as we go through the pictures here. Here she's posed with Bob Neal, a very long time dedicated IRM volunteer. Since several of us volunteers helping with the event are diehard CB&Q enthusiasts, most of us have collected countless pieces of Burlington memorabilia. We spent time prior to this event distributing ticket books, playing cards, timetables, matchbooks, ashtrays, and countless other items throughout Observation Car Juneau to help imply the late 1950s feel of the train. Here are 2 great friends of mine, Rick on the left and Charlie on the right, playing cards at the lone table inside the observation car. Walking around in Juneau for these brief moments before sunset truly felt like stepping back in time to an era I have only seen in movies or photos and otherwise have only been able to imagine. Little details such as the pack of Lucky Strikes or the Woman magazine all added to the ambiance that we hope to present for our photographers. The golden sunshine is undoubtedly what made these images so impactful. Here we have Ava enjoying both the camera lens and a cigarette. Here's a couple shots showing the ticket books and seat checks we added throughout the car for a little bit of added realism. As I mentioned before, a few of us have collected a lot of CB&Q memorabilia, but we didn't have quite enough room for everything in Juneau, the observation car. So I thought it would be nice to set up a little collage, so to speak, of all kinds of Burlington history for our guests to capture. We set this up on a table in Dining Car Series that evening. Here is Bob collecting tickets for Rebecca, another active IRM volunteer, with her brother Adam in the very last moments of daylight. This is Marcus Ray on the left, very, very active museum volunteer. And in the right-hand image, he's seen checking the timetable with Matt Holtz, another great friend and active museum member as well. Here we have conductor Ryan Deline doing the obligatory photo shoot timetable reading image with passengers with another friend of mine, Charlie, and his wife, Lucy. Ryan is another great friend, and he actually borrowed my Burlington conductor uniform for this event, and he might have worn it better than I ever did. Here we have Nick, Matt, and Marcus lined up next to observation car Juno, as well as Pullman observation car Ingelholm in the background, which was lit up for the event as well. This is Zephyr conductor and Zephyr crew leader, Jim West, another very long time IRM member with many years of involvement with the Nebraska Zephyr train set. One of my personal favorites from the whole event, kind of a spontaneous image. This was good friend on the left, John McCulloch, with Ava and Ryan posed for a quick impromptu photograph inside of Juno before we transitioned the entire event to all outside for some outdoor nighttime photography. Here we have Nick, Matt, Ryan, and John all enjoying a brief smoke and studying the employee timetable before their next departure of their respective trains. So the next big thing we did, we invited our passengers to pose for a few quick photos at the end of observation car Ingelholm. We cycled through a few of the couples and then had Ava close out this small scene before we headed over to the other end of the train for shots with the locomotive. To start the event, everything you've seen up to this point, many of those pictures were very spontaneous. I have always tried to offer to the guests opportunities and permission to ask our volunteers and our models for specific setups, any requests that they have within reason. Usually some guests have ideas that I could never have come up with, and even the models themselves are very good with some improvisation, coming up with fun ideas for fun little impromptu pictures. So this, for example, this was not planned by myself and Ralph and James. This was very impromptu. Now, this is the first time in over a decade that the Illinois Railway Museum has assembled this many dressed train crew members for the Nebraska Zephyr. And I would say, boy, we put them all together pretty well. They looked pretty good that evening. Before we moved into pictures of just the trains themselves, I wanted to assemble a photo of just the conductors and the trainmen, plus my longtime best friend, Mr. James Keats Jr. on the right, who was the engineer for the train that night and a huge part in the planning for that evening. Here's a group photo, a last look at our terrific models in front of 9911A. I am very lucky and very fortunate. I feel very lucky and very fortunate that our passengers that evening had just as much fun as our photographers did the entire time, all throughout the different setups. Nothing but smiles and laughs and great times for all. Everybody was having a good time. The leaders, the train crew members, the models, and the photographers. As a little bit of an encore, I asked these two if they would pose for a few shots in front of the engine. You know, why not have a little fun? Those two were having an especially good time. Our main scene, the one I had envisioned for a long, long time and was very glad to finally accomplish, was the 1940 built EMC E5 9911A in the Nebraska Zephyr train set next to East Union Depot, with our 1914 built American Car and Foundry CB&Q bag RPO car in the background off to the right. The scene was lit with LED floodlights with various color temperatures for a little bit of added flavor. For years at IRM, this view was blocked by 4 passenger cars, pretty much right where I'm standing with the photo line on either side of me. Those 4 passenger cars for a long time served as the museum's gift shop. And since the relocation of the gift shop into a new permanent building, the cars were moved and this scene opened up. Thanks to other museum volunteers who helped in moving some smaller display pieces out from in the way of this scene as it's seen here, to make the opportunity completely unobstructed for the shoot. For another encore, Ava changed into yet another outfit and posed for a few final shots in front of 9911A before we moved on to the final scene, the grand finale. The grand finale was the meet of these three engines at the west end of our depot platform in front of Spalding Tower. On the left is CB&Q SW7 number 9255, built by EMD in 1950. And on the right is CB&Q SD24 number 504, built by EMD in 1959. The conclusion of this scene was the end of photography for the evening. However, we did invite our guests on a late night train ride on the Zephyr as one last hurrah. All in all, very successful event with many different photo opportunities for our guests, which brought our guests and us back to the golden age of rail travel aboard one of the classiest trains to ever ride the rails. This is my presentation, folks. This is the end. I hope you all enjoyed. If you would please, feel free to check out my Facebook and Instagram pages listed here to see what I'm up to throughout the year, what's going on the rest of the time. Thank you again to Jonathan and Cincinnati Railroad Club for having me back, and thank you for watching the program.